Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. I've mentioned with my precious wife, Lisa, that the two of us have spent quite a bit of time engaged in watching either series or movies about Great Britain and its leadership, particularly Queen Elizabeth and also Margaret Thatcher. And we found the whole thing very fascinating. And one of the things that I would include among those fascinating things is the attempt to sort of translate our own political system into their political system, and to understand what means what, and the language that they use versus the language that we use. One of the things you hear in British politics is that whatever party is not in power at a given moment, whoever is deemed to be the head of that party in Parliament is referred to as the leader of the opposition. The leader of the opposition. So, for instance, if right now, on this day, Donald Trump is the president, and let's suppose they had a majority in the Senate still, but the Democrats had a majority in the House, Nancy Pelosi would be sort of the leader of the opposition. Now, I mention all of this because we're about to have, or have just had rather, a change in leadership. And while we can spend quite a bit of time talking bad about the things that have gone on over the past 4 years politically, most of us are going to be pretty concerned at the elevation of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as president and vice president. One of the things that we're going to be concerned about is the propensity that Democrats tend to have to raise taxes. We don't want to give them the money that they say that they need in order to do the things that they say that they're going to do. Well, keeping money away from the opposition in honorable ways is a good thing and a helpful thing. But it's also a helpful thing to support those who are trying to help people push back, to lend financial support to the opposition of those who are in power. Now, if you have listened to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast for any length of time, you know that the things that you hear are often deeply and profoundly countercultural, and they're ideas which push deeply and profoundly against the received wisdom of Washington, D.C. That is not to say that we're principally political at all. But we do spend our time and energy talking about the eternal truths against which the spirit of the age pushes. We do talk about the weaknesses in our own camps. We do talk about what the Word of God has to say about everything. And that's why we need support. One of the things we don't do, contra Washington and politicians, is we don't put our finger up to the air and say, well, what position can we take so that money might come in, or support might come in, or encouragement might come in? We don't do that. We don't play that game here. We start with the things that we believe the Bible teaches. And we start there with this glorious truth, that Jesus changes everything. There are issues and things that there are people that would like for me to be quiet about, to stop talking about. There are those places where people want to deny that the Christian faith has anything to say about this or that we take the opposite stand. We talk about everything all the time, and we talk about Jesus all the time because we believe Jesus changes everything. But change is never easy. Not for me, not for those who I think need to change. It's not easy for any of us. We are a toe-stepping ministry. But Jesus Changes Everything is produced, friends, by Dunamis Fellowship, which gets its name from the Greek word dunamis, which means power. The resurrection power. We believe that by the power of the Holy Spirit, that which was dead can be made alive. That which was filthy can be made clean. That which was wrong can be made right. We believe in the power of change. And that's why we want partners with us who share that belief, who share that conviction that says we need messengers who are not sent to tell us everything's okay, who are not sent to say peace, peace when there is no peace, who are not sent with the message of the day, but who are sent with the message of eternity. Will you consider coming alongside Dunamis Fellowship and the Jesus Changes Everything podcast? Will you make it a habit to support this work? We're looking for partners, people who are ready to commit to give one-time gifts or monthly gifts. All of that is welcomed, and we're grateful for it. We are asking that you would do so, and how you do it, again, it's very simple. rcsproul.com, rcsproul.com, rcsproul.com. There's a donate button there, and you push that, and it'll walk you all through the process. I want to thank those who have continued to support us, who've supported us from early on, and we need you. We are grateful for you. And we thank you for all. I give a thanks to all of you for listening in. We come now to the second to the last of our series on the 7 churches in Revelation. This is our 7th segment along these lines. There will be 8 in total because we did an introduction. And so we've devoted segments after that, one each to each of the letters. And now we come to the church in Philadelphia. Let me begin by reading what we find in Revelation. And to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, the words of the Holy One, the true One, who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one opens. I know your works. Behold, I've set before you an open door which no one is able to shut. I know that you have but little power, and yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. Behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan, who say that they are Jews and are not, but lie. Behold, I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and they will learn that I have loved you. Because you have kept my word about patience, endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world to try those who dwell on the earth. I am coming soon. Hold fast what you have so that no one may seize your crown. The one who conquers, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. Never shall he go out of it, and I will write in him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down from my God out of heaven, and my own new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Now, much of what we have said along the way as we've gone through these churches has been about the city itself and what was going on in the city, and more particularly how the city related to the Roman Empire. The city of Philadelphia actually only relatively recently had come into the Roman Empire. It had been built by an independent king in honor of his brother whom he loved, thus the name Philadelphia, which means brother love. And he, however, that king, did not have an heir. And so when he passed away, he essentially bequeathed his kingdom to the Roman Empire. But it was not the Romans principally at this time who were the problem or the challenge for the people of the city. We should remember throughout the time of the New Testament that there were really two great enemies that were coming at God's people. One were the Roman authorities, the government authorities from Rome. The other were the Jewish people in leadership, the same ones who hated Jesus so during his earthly ministry. Early on in the history of the church, Christians were considered a kind of subset of the Jewish folks. And they were welcomed in the temple and welcomed in the synagogues. Now, the synagogues were sort of like local churches, different from the temple in that there weren't sacrifices that were made there. They would have teaching and they would have preaching. And they were kind of social centers for the particular community. And what seems to have happened here in Philadelphia is something that's mentioned in other places, or at least suggested or hinted at, including in 1 Peter, that we've come to that place in the history of the relationship between Judaism and Christianity, that the Jews are now excluding those who embrace Jesus as Messiah, and particularly from the temple, and in this context, the synagogue. Now, why does this matter? Well, because this is how and why you see this language from Jesus, first, about a door that can't be opened and a door that can't be closed, and secondly, about this pillar in the temple. I want you to hear, I want you to see, imagine what it would be like for a people who had been in covenant community, a covenant community which was profoundly, historically conscious, that knew who their ancestors were, who knew what their ancestors believed, who could point back all the way back to Abraham. And now, because they've come to Christ, the Messiah, the long-awaited promised Messiah, the one of whom the prophets spoke, they're excluded from that community. The whole book of Hebrews is written to people experiencing that same problem, with the message being, do not go back. Well, Jesus' message here to the church in Philadelphia is, good for you for not going back. I'm so pleased that you have not gone back, that you haven't turned on me, that you have stayed loyal to me. And because of this, you're going to receive blessings from me. One, you're going to avoid the hardship that is coming soon. Two, those people that assaulted you are going to be begging for your favor. They're going to be bowing before you. Those people who look down their noses at you. Three, you are the people of God. Jesus says, I have the key of David. I open doors, not those people. And I'm bringing with me the real Jerusalem, the new Jerusalem. And in that real and new temple, you're going to be pillars of it. Don't be discouraged. God in the Old Covenant, friends, gave the shadows as a way to encourage God's people. But when the shadows were falling away, it was very hard for God's people to watch them go. But Jesus is coming in this book to assure them. He is with them. He is a victory. And by the way, one last thing. It's also profoundly discouraging. That door, that open door that no one can close, is not just you can come in and worship, but that open door is you're going to go out and proclaim the good news. You're going to have an impact on the world. You look small and despised and hated right now, but God is going to use you to manifest the glory of the reign of his Son. Just as with the other churches, this one has no bad news, as most of the other churches do, but as with all of them, the message is to rejoice in the glory of the reign of Jesus, to trust him, and to hold on. I'm delighted to have, once again, my precious wife, Lisa, with me. This is not one of the usual places that we do so, but it is a place that I thought you have some wisdom and insight to share. we're not, of course, either one of us doctors here, but I wanted to talk about seasonal affective disorder and the virtues and the values of vitamin D, not as a supplement, but it's something that you can get naturally, because we're entering into a time where not only do we have the ongoing hardships associated with COVID, we have the hardships for most of our listeners, if not all of them, that are going to be really uncomfortable with our new president. And we have a genuine lack of sunshine because it's wintertime, the days are shorter.
We'll relive. Where we live, we have
yes, not everywhere.
Right. There are other places that are sunny.
Absolutely. But for a lot of folks, it's a very difficult time. And all I really wanted to do was to just sort of remind people in this context that maybe it would be a good idea to spend some time getting outside, if possible, to soak up that sun when possible, and then also to communicate to folks the reality that the outside world impacts us emotionally. You know that I've struggled with depression. And one of the ways that I try to deal with it when it's most pressing on me is to say, I have a depression issue that's separate from whatever issue is depressing me. Right? So you've been a nutritionist, a dietitian. You've seen how what we bring into us impacts our emotional well-being, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you... When you coach people and instruct people on things to eat, is that something on your mind about what, not just I want you to be able to lose weight or whatever goals you have, but I want to maybe steady you?
Of course. You know, one of the first things that you learn is the body processes vitamin D in sunlight. So you can get it from natural being in the sun. Studies show for at least 20 minutes a day.
Okay.
That's not sun tanning. It's just being out in the sun.
Right. And you can be covered up.
Yeah, you can be covered up. And so not only does that photosynthesis happen in our body for chemical changes to be able to happen, but it's good for our psyche as well. You're not just closed in a dark hole. And so you're outside, and the sun is still there as long as it's daylight. If it's cloudy, the sun is still there.
Yeah.
But yeah, if there is an absolute that you're specifically trying to get vitamin D in, we do go through eating egg yolk, eating certain types of food that have higher amounts of vitamin D. But one of the things I would warrant people is not to self-diagnose, not to just decide that since they live somewhere where the days are shorter, it's cold, they're not out in the sun, that they're not just taking vitamin D.
Right.
Now, I will say that studies show that most people are deficient in vitamin D, and you want vitamin D in your body because that is going to help you not be immune compromised in getting flus, colds, and those types of things.
Which can also then affect your emotional well-being, those illnesses.
Yeah. Long term, it can cause depression.
Yeah, and you know, it reminds me of something I learned from you that I had no idea about, and that was, you've told me about the capacity of cinnamon to regulate our blood sugar levels, because blood sugar highs and lows can also sort of manifest in emotional responses. Your blood sugar's low, you're going to be kind of lethargic, you're going to be kind of maybe
skinny, shaky, lots of different symptoms.
So there is a lot to learn about being wise. Again, go ahead.
Well, seasonal depression disorder or seasonal affective disorder, either one, however you want to call that, both of those navigate us to recognize that those happen in reoccurring seasons.
Right.
When you do suffer from depression, that is a chronic situation. So where this happens, where it usually comes in fall and winter. And it was very interesting when we relocated here to Fort Wayne. I'd never seen so many tanning bed beauties, and I couldn't figure out why everybody was always in the tanning bed. They would even let their early teenagers go to the tanning bed.
Huh.
And I would just think, my goodness. But after being here for a long time and recognizing it helps people's psyche to be in a warm light. And so there is alternatives for light therapy for people to have access to light therapy that does help fight off that depression.
Excellent. Well, thank you, sir. No. Now, so the counsel that we're giving, which is just unsolicited and careful, is don't self-diagnose. And by the way, listening to this podcast is not the opposite of self-diagnosing, because we're not diagnosing. But do think about trying to spend some time outside and to recognize the impact that these things can have. You know, for me, I've said this before in the winter. You know, sometimes Lisa and I will go out for a walk, and it's not at all unusual that when the walk begins, we sort of assess the circumstances of the walk, or we may be looking around. Oh, doesn't the neighborhood look beautiful? Or look at the Christmas lights over there. One of the things that I keep coming back to in the wintertime is how bracing the cold is. For me, it's not a bad thing. It's a waking thing. It's like a
slap on the face. Yeah,
like what was that old commercial with Joe Namath and Farrah Fawcett for aftershave lotion. So, you know, take advantage of what God's providing for you in the season in which He's doing it, and don't just. I mean, there's a value to slowing down. There's a value to rest, but there's also a value to go out there and get in it.
Yes.
Well, sweetheart, I'm very grateful to have you in my life to help me navigate these things, and I'm very happy to have the opportunity to share some of this with our listeners. Thank you, sweetheart, for being with us.
Thank you for having me, honey. I love you.
I love you too.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com. And join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.